right? Because it's not World War III. I call it World Wax Cold War 7. And of course, with a lot of this, once again, we're going to pick on Wikipedia to kind of get a little insight as to some of the things that were happening. Someone brought up Unit 731, and this, of course, was biological and chemical warfare research and development. So I'm going to cover that just over. And yeah, one of the books I recommend to take a look at is Menticide and Other Essays. That's by Mawalimu K. Bumani Baruti. And of course, this is also within the realm of the psychology and even the whole industry of creating people, lives, and manipulating memory and thinking, right? So I found this as I was breezing through it. I'm looking to buy it, and I'll probably maybe I'd like to look at reading some chapters at some point. But definitely take a look because this is the kind of book that can give you the insight of what was used and is still being used, not just what it was in the past with uh, slaves in Africa and all of that stuff and the buck breaking, but it's what's still being used today. We call it. I mean, menticide is what it is because when you're literally brainwashing and uh, hypnotizing and doing a mass. The trigger word these days is mass hypnosis, right? I mean, this book covers at least probably some of the sciences that was used and or philosophies behind it. So it's something to take a look at, and it gives. And this is in the term, of course, of based on the Afrikaans in South Africa, based on what was going also on with the apartheid regime, right? So yeah, it's something to read about. And just wait for we get back. There are also some less. Most of us heard about the horrible experiments on humans of the Nazis done by Dr. Mengele, Joseph Mengele. But the Nazis weren't alone in conducting cruel experiments on humans. So as we look into this, 731, right? Short for Manchu Detachment 731, and also known as the Camel Detachment and Ishi Unit, was a covert biological and chemical warfare research and development unit in the Imperial Japanese Army that engaged in lethal human experimentation and biological weapons manufacturing during the Second Sino-Japanese War. Right, so that's and World War II. So that's the real deal. So this is some of your research to look through, read it up, but this falls in human experimentation, biological warfare, and chemical warfare. So, and of course, the reason why I implore you to take a look at some of these, and I'll donate later. Thank you. Uh, you get to see some familiarities, and once again, the fact that it's been done in history, right, doesn't mean that they stop doing it or they won't do it again. So let's just breeze through a few of these. The facility itself was built in 1935. It's always around those years. Ford was around, Pfizer was building up the companies that be it and the experiments uh, as a replacement for the Zongma, which was already a prison camp fortress. Anishi and his team used it to expand their capabilities. The program received generous support from the Japanese government until the end of the war in 1945. Unit 731 and other units of the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department operated biological weapon production, testing, deployment, and storage facilities, while Unit 731 researchers arrested by Soviet forces were tried at the December 1949 Charbovsky war crime trials, those captured by the United States, were secretly given immunity in exchange for data gathered during their human experiments. The United States covered up the human experimentations and handed stipends to the perpetrators on trial. Well, isn't that something? The Americans co opted the researchers' bioweapons information and experience for use in their own biological warfare program, much as they had done with German researchers in Operation Paperclip. Okay. Just to refresh your minds, Operation Paperclip was a secret United States intelligence program in which more than 1,600 Nazi German scientists, engineers, and technicians were taken from former Nazi Germany to the US for government employment after the end of World War II in Europe between 1945 and 1959. Look at these bazungus. Look at them. So, is it possible? And this is the 60s, right? So these guys are probably in their 50s, right? Rewind 20 years, right? Can you see it? And maybe some of them were the youth, right? Some of them folks might have even been easily. This guy, World War One, easily World War One, right? So look at them. That's what we call the Mazun. Look at this guy, right? Of course, you could smoke back then, and of course, uh, the guy with the head. Look at that. His head just like looked too perfect to like with considering what they did to him. Like I said, have discernment on everything, right? But it looks like a head that was ready, like, poof, poof. You know, these guys though. Where are they now? I wonder, eh? I wonder how many with their families and their grandkids and right. These are the people that ran the world then, and somehow, right? Their whatever their proteges or whatnot, 50, 60 years later, these people long gone. This one already lost his head. Well, if not, he wouldn't be still here today, right? And that's where the relevance of life happens. Meanwhile, Kissinger would have probably been alive, and he still is alive. See, what could they be talking about here? I wonder. But that happened. So all of that was to mention. Okay, so 731, Unit 731 is basically Japan's biological warfare project, and of course, this is one of the lesser known atrocities of the 20th century, and it was committed by this Unit 731. So it was not until 1984. Now, hear this. For 40 years, the horrific activities of Unit 731 remained one of the most closely guarded secrets of World War II. It was not until 1984, right, that Japan acknowledged what it had long denied, vile experiments on humans conducted by the unit in preparation for germ warfare. So the reason why I brought this up in this episode also this week is I learned this from a senior, a boomer. It was one of those things, like he said, I don't know everything, I can just relate the information. And I was like, this confirms that even after 1984, right, only then it had acknowledged. So deliberately infected with plague, anthrax, cholera, and other pathogens, an estimated 3,000 of enemy soldiers and civilians were used as guinea pigs. Some, the more horrific experiments included vivisection without anesthesia and pressure chambers to see how much a human could take before his eyes popped out. So let's just double check here what this word means. Sounds like a okay, the practice of performing operations on live animals for the purpose of experimentation or scientific research, used only by people who are opposed to such work. right? So it's, yeah, slice and dice on others. So that's what that means. So doing that without anesthesia and pressure chambers, right? So 731 was set up in 1938. My mom is part of that generation. She was born in 36, right? So that's not so off the cusp. Had she been around still, she'd be in her 80s, right? So she would have been a child, probably not know, but old enough to say, well, in the 40s or 50s, it was something that maybe they would have known, right? That's why I always dig my elders and follow the timeline. So, occupied China with the aim of developing biological weapons. It also operated a secret research and experimental school in Shinjuku, central Tokyo. It was its head was Lieutenant Yashiro Ishii. So, the unit was supported by Japanese universities and medical schools which supplied doctors and research staff. The picture now emerging about its activities is horrifying. Of course, this is 1986, and it's 20. I mean, even after 1984, you know what? We've heard about the internment camps, right, in Canada, and and while that's very cruel, right, that was because the politicians of the time were putting everyone into one basket, one size fits all. And while this was going on, hey, back home was, well, I don't know about, I believe there were no experiments carried out here, but we know the history of what happened. So nobody wins here, right? So universities, medical schools would supply doctors and research staff, right? So how this emerged, okay, barbaric trials. It's pretty much what they did. Who were murdered in the name of research were used in hideous vivisection, and yeah, okay. So right, it's just telling you how bad shit got, right? So this is on unit731.org, and if you need, folks, look it up as we're trying to take a look into the acts of war. Schlemiel Schlemazel, Happenstance Incorporated. So this is of course, once again, these are some of the frostbite testing, syphilis. Oh, that's a popular one because isn't that what happened in America, right? Rape and forced pregnancy, which is always the method of war, as Chancellor Williams, if when you read his book, The Destruction of Black Civilization, the war and pillage of that to lighten the generations, right? This is the act of war, prisoners and victims, right? So surrender and immunity, American grant of immunity, destruction of evidence. So there might be a lot to say about that because why would they do that? And this is the thing in this world, this is pretty much what's still happening now, right? So you guys look this shit up and you can read through it, but I can definitely tell you, at least from what we're seeing here, right? This is, I mean, you hear it's happening there. Imagine what happened in Germany. Imagine, you know, right? So female prisoners were forced to become pregnant for use in experiments, as opposed to today, where they would probably say, "Hey, this would have been a reason for having an abortion," right? So they, okay, look at this hypothetical possibility of vertical transmission from mother to child of diseases, particularly syphilis, was the stated reason for the torture. Fetal survival and damage to mother's reproductive organs were objects of interest, though a large number of babies were born in captivity. There have been no accounts of any survivors of that, children included. So, or they were killed, and female prisoners were killed after birth or aborted. So there you go, right? And of course, the male, right? They were used in single studies, experimentation. Yeah, yeah. Women, of course, by bacteriological. physiological sex experiments, of course, and which is pretty much, I would say, even the majority of it, right? And as the victims of sex crimes. So, yeah, this is some bit more meat. You could look. Look at this. American historian Sheldon H. Cyrus states that over 200,000 died in addition to Chinese casualties, 1,700 Japanese troops in Zhejiang during the Zhejiang-Jiangxi campaign were killed by their own biological weapons while attempting to unleash the biological agent, including serious issues with distribution. Well, this is like pretty much like what they tried to do with, which is why using like any type of biological weapon, gas, what was it? The gas used during the war, sarin gas, right? And which recently, apparently, Bashir, whatever the guy in, is it Lebanon or Syria, was using? Yeah, Bashir Assad, right? They were saying he was using, chemical weapons, and of course, how true, what is not, right? But they did this the first time, if I'm correct, and this is why in the war, during the war, they put there's a decree that you couldn't use biological weapons because the wind would blow back when they fucking released the shit, and that's how a lot of them, the first few times they let that shit out, they open a can of whoopee, right? And that shit, sarin gland gas, fucking blew right back in their face, either by nature or maybe even more crafty methods to get the wind or misdirection of where to open that shit. So look at that. See? By their own biological weapons. Yeah, yeah. Indicating serious issues with distribution. Maybe distribution knew. And they're like, you know what? They're going to open it, and that's how they do it. Oh, they're going to all choke and they're going to die, right? Yeah. So they release plague infected animals, cruel people. At least, and do you think we not have this today? Maybe not as much, or maybe more. You don't know. We never know, right? I mean, we have a good idea, but so read it up. That's your homework. And while we're also looking at that, right? I did mention I wanted to hit this lady up. Racism, eugenics, and hatred. The truth behind Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger. So just a little background. We've heard of Planned Parenthood, and so once again, folks, for what they know about Margaret Sanger, let's look her up. You know how we do it, right? Just before we watch this shit, real quick. So Margaret Higgins Sanger, born Margaret Louise Higgins, September 14th, 1879. So that's literally because I'm a September 15th. So there you go, you Virgos, when you put your minds to it, eh? Almost, what is it, 110 years to before, or yeah, 110 years before me. 110 years and 1 day before me. Um, and then, Virgo Trope, September 6th, 1966, 666. Wow, cool. And also known as Margaret Sanger Slee, a birth control activist. So let's just, you know how we do it here. We look up the baby mama. Who your mama? All right, so let's get straight to it. Yes, we did okay. So, because we gotta find out who her mama. So, New York, Harding, New York, Tucson, Arizona. She looks like Bill, eh? I'll get back to that. Social reformist. So, did she have kids? Spouse William Sanger and James Noah H. No Gates there. And relatives. A sister. Progressive era radical feminist. So, and we have 3 children. Let's see how that worked out. So she used her writings and speeches primarily to promote her way of thinking. Once again, these people can impose. right? Family limitation under the Comstock Act, 1914. So, along with related state laws, the Parent Act was passed in March 3rd, 1873, as the Act for the Suppression of Trade in and Circulation of Obscene Literature and Article. So it's probably some, early day censorship, because, the folks, especially then, right? Alcohol and decadence, pretty much like today. She feared the consequences of her writings. So she went to Britain because people were all like dusting it up. Uh, at the end of the day, you could look her up. You probably heard about her. She wanted to prevent back alley abortions, which were common at the time because abortions were legal. Well, let's consider what the plight of women were, right? Like we see rapes and stuff were happening quite and abuses. How often, based on the rights, we have to also have discernment because the civil rights movement and all the women suffragists, like in the 20s, it happened. Look what happened. They brought the fucking Klan, stronger and better than before because of them. The 60s, the same thing. Black Panthers come in, they fucking bastardized and niggered out everybody. And now the women fell for that. Here we are today, right? So, eh, eh, get to know these people, right? Well, in New York City, she organized the first birth control clinic to be staffed by all female doctors, as well as a clinic in Harlem, which had an all African American advisory council. So she's passing off, I guess, you know, I mean, cool. But the controversy does still stem from, at least at the time, being one of the first women to. I mean, look, she got her two sons there, Grant and Stewart, right? How did they end up? She had them. I mean, not her place, right? But she said she wanted to help women who were getting back alley abortions. Okay, so she was born to Irish parents. Probably had some, like let's go down the rabbit hole. How much Negro roots with the hair, as we've seen some of the documentaries, right? Black Irish, but so disconnected and so lightened up, you wouldn't even be able to tell if they were white or black, right? So, and maybe they hate themselves and invert that. Ta-da! Hook up with the right people the same way. Ta-da! All right, so Irish parents, a free-thinking stonemason father, Michael Hennessy Higgins, and Anne Purcell Higgins. Michael had immigrated to the United States age 14, joining the army in the Civil War as a drummer, age 15. So that's pretty young. Upon, of course, back then, yeah, they did crazy shit like that. And you'll see how I'll lead up to the young people and the orphans as we wrap up. Upon leaving the army, he studied medicine and phrenology. Okay, phrenology, yeah, which is the study of skulls. But ultimately, became a stone cutter, chiseling out angles, saints, tombstones. Yeah, had to be that. And accompanied her family to Canada during the Great Famine. So that would be also known as the Irish Potato Famine. She married Michael in 1869. In 22 years, Anne Higgins conceived. Now listen to this: 18 times, birthing 11 alive before dying aged 49. So, when we used to hear, even with my own grandparents, and they have 8 kids and all, and then the generation before had 18, we probably need to reanalyze that again, because we haven't seen anybody pull 18 year after year after year in a litter like our great grandparents, like we've heard in a long time. But now, because more information's come out about so much, and the sciences, and a lot of the kids were orphans, family of family, inversion, right? This is probably why we've heard those back in those days. We used to, because I was wondering, someone can have like birth. like 18, 20 children. So she, even if she got married at 14, which was something they did back then, right? Whatever, the boys were 16, the mothers were 14, right? Like very young. So even if she had her kids 18 years after 14, she would be like, like so old, like 40 some, near 50, and it's like 18. Passing, that's almost one, like a year, right? 11 alive. So how do you birth eight coming out through you and 11 alive before dying age 49? So that tells you, if we decide to be contemporary about it, what we know today, back then we were saying, oh, she had a good strong womb, like a rubber band, or not too healthy, thus the kids dying. But now today we can understand that this birthing, that carrying, that in vitro, that adoption could have been part of it. And of course, that along with the standard of living for children who had no rights. So Sanger was the sixth of 11 surviving. That's a lot of kids. A lot of fucked up people grew up then. Even if you had that big family thing, it was still kind of 11. Think about that. People hardly get it together with two kids today. Talk knowing your history to me, right? So spending her early years in a bustling household, supported by her two elders. mm, In '02, she married an architect, William, giving up her education. Yeah. Suffering from consumption. Yeah, it's back then it's like tuberculosis. He had coughing, consumption. That was big in the time. Margaret, it's kind of like today, eh? Remember there was a time people, well, if you're millennials, you're learning now. Tuberculosis is still around, but they claim that that has been cured. But there was a time you got that shit, you were done, right? You were done. Yeah, caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Tuberculosis generally affects the lungs, but it also affects other parts of the body. Most infections show no symptoms, which is known as latent tuberculosis. Another day, look it up. So she was able to bear three, as they say, bear three, and the five settled down to a quiet life, New York. Episcopal Church. Okay, so a fire destroyed her homes, Hastings on the Hudson. Her new life, and we're gonna breeze through this. If you're not reading with me along, let's like, I just want to get to some of the meat, because as simple and maybe even, you know, might be convoluted for some. All of this, labor action, textile strike, right? There is something that might be revealing as to maybe where she got the inspiration to do what she did. So, maybe God's grand design. Some people come into this world to be wicked and do what they do. That's part of the great picture. Right? So she became involved with local intellectuals. That says a lot, because the intellectuals of the time would probably be like, the writers of those years, right? Mark Twain, if I'm correct, right? Maybe. So she became involved with local intellectuals, left-wing artists, socialists, right? Left-wing, far left, and social activists. So these are some of the people. I'm not going to read it through. You could just take a look. Just get a look at the people, the sketch, right? So Upton Sinclair, Mabel Dodge, wealthy patron of the arts, old money. Got a pretty new modern look for that era, but who knows anything about time travel? You get it? Emma Goodman, an anarchist, political activist, and writer. So there's your woman's lib. Uh, Early 19, whatever, 19, what is it, 12 style. What every mother should know, what every girl should know. So she's writing this stuff for discussion of sexuality, and people were outraged. I've noticed that the folks who usually outrage people are usually the ones who are not experiencing or oops, sorry about the sound. They're not experiencing or only doing what they do by abuse, right? But it's when I want to, yeah, let's see where. Uh, she met a woman who underwent frequent childbirth, miscarriage, yeah, yeah, and lack of information on how to avoid unwanted pregnancy. Well, lack of information. Here's the thing: even if you had, I believe you had rubbers then, and rhythm and practice. So why? See, that was part of, I guess, opening up the moral laws, because no one's mentioning marriage here, but we want to understand that it's well unwanted pregnancy during a marriage, right? But see, contraceptive information was prohibited in 1873. Let's see. So it's kind of nothing big, nothing, and I'm sure you probably won't. At least maybe in this page, we probably won't see as much directly. But this is what she's all about this. So, and they were breaking laws, and so I guess my thing is, we do hear about the Ebonics, and then we hear about her racial stance on. The reason why she wanted to do this was to um, eradicate more babies of color. John D. Rockefeller, he funded it. This guy, he didn't look so good when he was old, that's for sure. I've seen some pictures here. Boy, oh boy. Yeah, John Davidson Rockefeller, only son of Standard Oil. Rama Baron. Anyway, and his family continued. They make the donations, and so that's at least okay. So this pretty much is where it all kicks up. And she had appealed her conviction, and that's where the clinic she worked at received funding. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist. And between 1920, she made these copies, Woman and the New Race, the Pivot of Civilization. So, and worked with the African American community. Let's take a look at this. Okay, so let's see. She worked with African American leaders and professionals, yeah. Birth control, let's see, Urban League. Okay, that's one. So a black social worker said open up, and that's how that started. Securing funding from Julius Rosenwald Fund. Okay. Staffed with black doctors. Well, this is interesting. In 1930, 15-member advisory board consisting of black doctors. Yes, yeah, yeah. How come we never? Maybe it's out there. I didn't hear much of this. The clinic was publicized in American or in African American press as well as black churches. Approval of Webb Du Bois. Yeah. So she was recognized even among the people. So they're saying Sanger did not tolerate bigotry among her staff, nor would she tolerate any refusal to work within interracial projects. So, and her work with minorities earned praise from Coretta and Martin Luther King Jr. Right? Mrs. King read her husband's acceptance speech that praised Sanger, but first said her own words because of Sanger's dedication, her deep convictions, and for her suffering, for what she believed in. I would like to say I'm proud to be a woman tonight. That's pretty loaded. And once again, if you really think outside the box and the rabbit hole, right, it says a lot because what are they? I believe they were liberal or, they were whatnot, possibly Democratic, I'm correct. Well, there you go. We'll cheek up with you too, right? Maybe that's why also the fate was met. I mean, these are just ways, because it's once again, we're all together, right? So that means it was before he died, she passed away. Yeah. Let's see. Uh, yeah. So King Coretta says because, yeah, so deep convictions. So the Negro Project was conceptualized by both control activists, Margaret Sanger, and implemented by Birth Control Federation in America, right? Spread the awareness of, so they call it the Negro Project. Black ministers, right? Familiar? Planned Parenthood area. So it's pretty much not more, but I guess they would do that just to, they want to sometimes make their people look good. So someone will get a pass like her, like Hugh Hefner. You wouldn't see all the bad shit about him now. So congestive heart. Yeah. 1 year after Supreme Court enable a woman to fully enjoy sexual relations without fear of unwanted pregnancy. Well, they say she opposed excessive sexual indulgence. So she seems to be they put in her like all on the up and up here, right? Sanger wrote that masturbation was dangerous, and my personal experience as a trained nurse while attending. Oh yeah, well, yeah, I guess if you got diseases, no matter what their elements, I've never found anyone so repulsive as the chronic masturbator. Yeah, well, she seemed to be, they really, and of course, freedom of speech is questioned here. So I don't know. And this is where it gets cheeky, right? She appealed the societal need to limit births by those least able to afford children, right? So while yes, here she found the overlap. And once again, we're just gonna. This is where you can read because by this point, right, you can research further. You can do some reading on movement in America, a history of birth control, Charles Davenport, eugenist, the morality of birth control, 1921, irresponsible, reckless people preventing their exercising control over the nerves. Yeah, so Margaret Sanger opposed abortion and sharply distinguished it from birth control, and she believed that the former is a shameful crime. Well, then again, like I said, if her connection and her sin to put into this world that safe way to birth, maybe, or even positive planning, but yeah, not more than that, but definitely do more research. In personal correspondence, she expressed her sadness about the aggressive and lethal Nazi eugenics program and donated to the American Council Against Nazi Propaganda. So what the hell's going on, right? Sanger believed that self-determining motherhood was the only unshakable foundation for racial betterment. Wow, like that's avant-garde. But once again, it's something to learn. Let's say as an alternative, right? Instead of what we know, because right now, everything that's happening with even the abortion, even after long she's been gone, this tells us it tells us at least that she's not as cool as we always heard. But once again, right? Founded American birth control group. Founding principles, we hold that children should be conceived in love, truth, not in the tube, not by abuse, not in an artificial womb, born of mother's conscious desire. So that's powerful too. A conscious, desire to want your existence, and only begotten under conditions which render possible the heritage of God. Uh, yep. So, just to get a look, since we're on here with this and the Negro Project, conceptualized by birth control activists, implemented by these guys, Birth Control Federation, spread awareness. So this is about spreading awareness. But why is it called the Negro Project? National Emergency Council, Southern Property. Sanger conceptualized the Negro Project, goals of the project. Albert Lasker, an American advertising executive, $20,000. Well, you know, once again, something to look at. We'll be right back.
The Mike Wallace interview. In the eyes of some, Margaret Sanger has been a heroine. In the eyes of others, she's been a destructive force.
In her own words, Sanger pushed for a society that limited births to those she deemed fit to have children.
I think the great.
Doesn't she look a little bit like Billy? If you really kind of check out her, that glance, right? That glare. Look at that. Freckles, probably was a redhead, I guess, right? Or whatnot. But throw some glasses on that, right? Age it up a bit. I'm just saying, right? Because that's part of it. They say there is a relation. And I'll probably look in a little bit more into that in a sec. But I'm just saying, right?
Society that limited births to those she deemed fit to have children.
I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically.
Look at her there. Wow. So, and she, you can see the resemblance currently. Throw some glasses on that, and then, we can definitely help the population. And what? Well, you gotta wait 2 years. What are you talking about? Like what? Please give me a break. So she's got that, eh? You can see it, the squinting, the nose, right? The whole line of the cheek, all of them things. Just throw some glasses on that, right? But there she goes. She's like, people shouldn't have baby. Who are these people? Who were these people, and who are they still to tell us who, what, where, when, how it should be?
Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things, just marked when they're born.
In 1916, Sanger opened the country's first birth control clinic. As a member of the American Eugenics Society, she advocated improving the genetic composition of humans through controlled reproduction of different races and classes. She often wrote about the issue in the journal she founded, called the Birth Control Review. In 1919, writing,
I personally believe in the sterilization of the feeble-minded, the insane, and the syphilitic. The most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the over-fertility of the mentally and physically defective.
Many point to a 1923 New York Times interview as proof of Sanger's racist motives, in which she referred to people as weeds, saying,
It means the release and cultivation of the better racial elements in our society and the.
So what? Wheats and tears? Is that what she's trying to say? She's trying to get a little, semi-scientific, extirpation, destruction of defective stocks. those human weeds. Human weeds. Oof, that's harsh, right? Pretty much like what they're saying today, right? They're basically bringing us down to like object weeds. This is somebody that, because what we see going on today, right? This is the person who kicked that shit off. Did we become better for it in, let's say, the last 80, 90 years? Is the world a better place? It seems like it's worse. Maybe it's because we've been, probably knocking off future potential everywhere, right? No matter how, if we say feeble-minded. You know what's so hypocritical about that? Look at that old bro there who passed away a couple of years now. Remember Stephen Hawkins, right? You had that Negro. Apparently, he was okay. He was straight 1 minute, like his legs were working and everything. Next minute, he got I don't know, a type of sclerosis or whatnot, and he was twisted up more than a garbage can, right? Or a cola can, let's say, right? And it's not mocking. It's just saying the world believed or still believe or whatnot with his theories on the universe, right? And one could say, well, generally, when you even look in the street and you see folks who might have a type of physical or even uh, mental disability, right? Most folks, right off the bat, like what she's saying, right? Extirpation, destruction of the defective stocks, those human weeds. So someone like a Stephen Hawkins could be considered a weed, right? Just for any type of what could appear to even be a defect. Many, maybe most of our world leaders could probably, fall under that, right? But they made it. So my point being that even if she can say, well, we were weeds, and then we had this guy, Stephen Hawkins, who was born maybe around that time, right? And then when he got ill, he already was kind of looking awkward to begin with, like most of these folks, right? Like these scientific folks. It's always, like I said, invert, outvert, twist upside down, inside out. So next thing you know, this guy, especially during his most crippling years in the discomfort. You'd see him if you recall him, and I'm sure people probably don't even recall him because once again our memories are zapped, right? But he passed away a few years ago, and his state, he was talking through what we call a digital type of voice uh, voice mechanic, right? He was rolling in the chair, so he would be talking like this, but he couldn't talk. His, jaw was displaced. He was mangled. You could see, you see people go through that, but it's like, wow, you really look kind of like, how the shit did you get that, right? Did a bug bite you? Did you, but once again, things that might not always come off of the natural, it's usually, as we're understanding, there's got to be something or some alteration within the human body. Weeds will become weeds because, once again, weeds are not getting the care, right? Weeds in the tear also is that. The tear is that, that's in the rocks and all that. You're still gonna grow some good wheat. It's not for us necessarily. It's all about how we take care of it, right? Also. But yes, going into this, once again, Stephen Hawkins, this guy was a guy who was talking about the universe, right? And the potential of, the extensionalist way of thinking outside the box, right? We're questioning God. Well, we can do better. We can go to the beginning of time and not call it God, but call it the Big Bang, right? And so forth. And here, is that guy still around? No, he's a human like anybody else. In fact, when he was in the wheelchair, right, talking through that machine, more people were listening to him than, let's say, someone sober-minded, whoever that could have been, or even during that time would have long since passed away or been, once again, ostracized. But people were listening to Stephen Hawkins like he was God, right? And he had his clique of people that, basically thought of him as that. That's why he was able to, and we don't know, even if he wasn't able to speak. How did he get all that shit out in paper? I guess his brain was working hot fire, right? His brain was working. So that says a lot. Folks, back up the picture and take a look. It says a lot of fucking lot. Right? It's like, how does, imagine if he was like a fucking Negro all twisted up. People can't even handle a fat Negro, right? A short Negro. Any Negro that looks different per se to the general stereotypical norm, like basketball player look, right? And no one, you don't see no basketball player talking shit like Stephen Hawkins, right? Or even having the mind. If anything, they just invest. So this is how bamboozled we get. Not to say the guy was, no, he wasn't stupid or anything, but bro, you're really like, you're using just your tongue to move around and speak, right? Activating shit with your tongue. That's cool. We're glad even the technology and science was created for you to sustain you like that, right? To give you, sustain you, to give you the chance to express your existential thoughts about the universe, and thus any other person, especially coming into this world after all of that, can be amazed and say, wow, it's a miracle. This guy who's in this wheelchair, he's basically mangled up, right? He don't move. You can only see, not even his eyes are blinking. He's telling me about how we all got here.
Gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extirpation of defective stocks, those human weeds which threaten the blooming of the finest flowers of American civilization.
Hayden Ludwig, an investigative researcher, has extensively studied Sanger's life and writings.
She talked about the need for race betterment through controlling these weeds, basically undesirable people.
In 1939, after opening another clinic in Harlem, the birth control activist launched the Negro Project, an initiative.
The Negro Project. Look it up. It's out there in Wikipedia, and this is not long. This is like, for some of us, it's within my grandparents' time, right? And then you had the whole stuff. So this is why it's like, yeah, the way a lot of us bros are coming at everything that's going on now, we can take a big look and say, whoa, 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 whoa. We can have discernment. We can have discernment about who we trust about putting shit up in our arms, who we trust about, the history, if you follow the timeline about the truth of world catastrophes and ailments, right? Whether it be polio or syphilis. Here we are today. Sure, maybe not as many strong, but we're here to tell you, have fucking discernment. Open your eyes. Stop sleeping in the clouds, being in the matrix of things, because 1989 was the year when all that shit got activated, right? Whatever plan it was they were trying to do, that was started maybe 60, 50 years previous to that, right? After the Second World War, it according to how they do dates and weighed out timelines, right? So that means there might have been folks who were probably children when Sanger was around, groomed, and there they are today in their maybe 80s, right? This is what I'm trying to put together. Have discernment. So the Negro Project happened, and as you're going to see how that initiative, you don't think that damaged up even the fucking molecular DNA of even the folks who were able to have kids, and so on and so on and so on. So take a look.
Supported by Black leaders, such as civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois.
Whoa, 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 whoa. This sounds familiar. So we hear about Webb Du Bois, right? And there's some pros and there's some cons about him, from what even I've read about him and still see about him. But you see how the underhandedness of certain things happen? While this guy was, out there doing his own civil rights movements for folks, being, of course, part of the establishment with, which is known as the Boule, right? And whatnot. Once again, this is where I can say, does color matter in the sense of, you know, doing such things like a genocide or extermination, right? If we look at the timeline and the facts that we learn now, like once again, King James, right? We know he was a bro. We know a lot of the presidents had roots in them. So, yeah, it's kind of blown out of the water, but there are folks, I guess, on once again, this goes back to the bigger picture of things, who are probably, saying, listen, it is what it is. You're still a nigga at the end of the day. You gotta play ball. And of course, a lot of the early civil rights leaders had to be, once again, at the table. They had to negotiate, whether it, no matter who it was, right? Frederick Douglass, same thing. So this is familiar tropes that we even see today. Black looking people who, maybe with good intentions, right? We'll give it, okay, we'll give this a one-off. Maybe he didn't know. Du Bois didn't realize that the consequences of this shit was going to blow up, and it was going to get hijacked anyways for other people, and it was going to be used against us, right? Thus, case in point, like what we see today. Anyone going along with what a certain particular party is doing based on ethics, moral ethics, spiritual ethics, the whole works. Human rights, human ethics. It tells us if someone is actually breaching that, this is a hot alarm to get off our black asses and start calling shit out and doing something about it.
Claimed the program used the pretense of better health and family planning for poor blacks in the South
See, they
as
mean
an
well.
attempt to limit the black race. Ludwig says some on the left grapple with Sanger's past and how to interpret her legacy.
They know when she writes about human weeds, they know that it's repulsive. They know it's disgusting. The left will never abandon Margaret Sanger, because if they do, she's the foundation of so many of their views.
Sanger once shared her vision for a preferred race at a women's branch of the Ku Klux Klan, writing,
A woman's branch of the Ku Klux Klan. A woman's branch of the Ku Klux Klan. So, while we're there, this is the point. And then between all of that, Webb Dubois, right, was, hey, let's try this out. When she's practically telling you, let's just wipe all you niggas out somehow. And, well, if it's the betterment of our people, the other brother says, right? Sure, why not? It's better maybe having that happen than being born to be murdered and lynched anyway, right? So it's really deep. It's deep seated too. And this is what we see here. Let me just give you a little bit more of this and we'll move on.
In her autobiography,
Always, to me, any aroused group was a good group.
despite those views, liberals praised Sanger's work while ignoring her history.
I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her
Oh,
courage, her tenacity, her vision. I am really in awe of her.
Ryan
Whoa.
Baumberger, founder of the Radiance Foundation, says abortion proponents are working to clean up Sanger's past and what she stood for.
They have to reinvent her every time they talk about her in order to justify their celebration of her.
Former Planned Parenthood Director Abby Johnson says those inside the abortion industry are trained to overlook Sanger's racist views.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? I'm going to repeat that part one more time. So, all of this with the Planned Parenthood, and once again, if you look into that rabbit hole and you see how, the other parties that were involved in making Planned Parenthood along, because Sanger wasn't the only one. There were so many other folks, right? Even till today that are attached to that. Whether or not it's helped produce quality in our world, oh, we'll see. We see how that's going, right?
Industry are trained to overlook Sanger's racist views.
They give you an answer like, well, I mean, yes, Margaret Sanger was a racist, but everybody was a racist back then. You accept.
Okay. Do I need to say more? Everybody was racist. And of course, even the black people getting hanged and burned and lynched, I'm sure I would be a fucking racist after that, right? But here's our twist. Today, instead of being like, let's say, angry at the real racist, no, it's working. We're angry at ourselves. And once again, we're the victim, right? So look how they try to you see, this back then, black then, is happening today. And of course, unfortunately, a lot of shit has worked because once again, you have a lot of folks in our tribe, right? Our Negro ass tribe, twerking, popping each other off. I mean, it's like apples and oranges, right? If I'm correct, that shit wouldn't have flown back in her time. That's why she was saying, let's do this shit before shit pops off. Whether it was a good thing, once again, that's the moral question. I say no.
Accept it because she is your hero, and she has to be your hero. You cannot question Planned Parenthood.
In 1990,
So once again, going back to Grandmaster J, John Fitzgerald Johnson, right? He's for the people, right? And look how we're bugging out, right? You know, he's putting him in jail for vocalizing, bringing people together, vocalizing, hey, we need to take care of black business first. We know not all white people hate us, right? We avoid those folks, black, white people who innately were groomed to hate us. We put an olive branch, even if they want to maybe have some discourse, but if they don't, fuck them. But once again, I would say someone like him for today is a freaking big badass hero. Meanwhile, we looking at this woman, she well dead now since the 60s, right? 66, I believe, right? And, you know, we still look up to her. We're running with her shit. It's actually an industry, right? So we could still turn a blind eye to people like her. And that's pretty much what we're seeing as it's actually living its form in a party, a political party, right? So she's your hero. Long dead, she's got whatever family still in the house running the business. They're our heroes. Just like we know, I have friends who were saying, like they were, you know, they found Willie Gates a hero, and I said, after all this time, this is a Gen Xer like me. We said in the beginning when we were young, right? We remember him when he came out and he was doing all those weird tricks, jumping over tables, like, you know, floating, like had this potential weird gift. You see, another weird fucking quirk. He was able to stand in position, and for some reason, like let's say he'd walk towards a table, and he'd literally like jump over the table, but just his legs would lift up, whoop, and he crossed the table. That was like a weird, cool thing he was able to do, right? So when you see that, when I remember seeing that, I was like, wow, this guy's he's a nerd, fuck, right? And then with the, you know, developing Microsoft and everything. Anyways, all of that, now here we are, 30 some years later, all of us grew up with him, you know, and I had, you know, there's some brothers who are like, yeah, this guy's cool. You know, when the illness came around, he's like, right, I could say it right away. This guy was like, oh, Willie's gonna be able to invent something that will help beat this terrible illness, right? And this is a bro, and he's like, yeah, man, he's cool. Like this guy's like, you know, why? Because he's got money, so he has money to bring in the best people. And I'm like saying, you know, like how can you fucking trust that if he has the money? What if the person he chose is for the health ministry and advice on DNA and what if they're just freaking bikers who just kind of got a false license and are running with shit? Which is probably, I suspect, many people, especially in the last 100 years, as we know today, even the medical industry we're hearing is under threat, right? It's falling apart. Well, maybe they kind of let loose on the books and the protocols, but I digress. So this is what I'm saying. This is why I'm doing this long ass winded episode here to see and show you what time it was and what time it still is, right? My bro was telling me, yeah, Bill could do this, he could do that. And look, where's Bill today? Telling you on television, oh shit, I feel sad that all those fucking Africans actually survived, you know, COVID. And here we have a brother, a friend of mine saying, well, he's still my hero. Never wake up.
1987, Stephen Mosher of the Population Research Institute wrote about the push to repackage Margaret Sanger in the Wall Street Journal.
The reason I call it the repackaging of Margaret Sanger is because after the Nazi regime destroyed the legitimacy of eugenics forever, they then went back and said, oh, she was just an early feminist. She was just, we call it the
Okay, the repackaging, that's the propaganda, right? Catch what he says.
Packaging of Margaret Sanger is because after the Nazi regime destroyed the legitimacy of eugenics forever.
What? The Nazi regime destroyed the legitimacy of eugenics forever. How the fuck can you legitimize eugenics? So you see right there, we caught something, right? Legitimacy of eugenics. Fuck, it's eugenic. It's killing. It's taking like you're culling. So I just wanted to see if you caught that, right? Listen to what people say. However, sometimes convoluted they try to throw in language, it just takes that legitimacy of eugenics forever. Like what the?
They then went back and said, "Oh, she was just an early feminist. She was just an early supporter of family planning." No, she wasn't. Now, she was a supporter of giving IQ tests to people. She was in favor of using those IQ tests to determine who should be sterilized and who should have children.
In a response titled The Demonization of Margaret Sanger, Alexander Sanger, her grandson and president of Planned Parenthood at the time, called Mosher's editorial unfair. In the same piece, Esther Katz, director of NYU's Margaret Sanger Papers Project, claimed evidence revealing Sanger did not rationalize her support for birth control on racist grounds, and she never advocated genocidal policies aimed at racial, ethnic, or religious groups.
Okay, I'm just gonna stop it there, and we're gonna move on. You can watch the rest of the documentary, right, and decipher for yourself. But you're seeing it right here. Even though, like the other brother was saying, right, delegitimizing genocide or sterilization, because it was good and useful for some reason, right? Whatever you're trying to say. Here you are, you're trying to soften up this person. The fact that even they can debate her her moral grounds, right? And what was her ethics. The fact that even it's a talking point, and they're throwing in like what we see today. Well, she was a radical feminist, and for her, that was the Black Lives Matter of the time. So therefore, we're gonna hear different things. We're gonna hear she was a racist. We're gonna hear she's not. At the end of the fucking day, you're talking about eugenics. So where's the moral ground to be? Once again, I will reiterate. That's why I say, brothers, bro. If I was running the world, that shit wouldn't be. Why? Because we feel it. This is why I can say if we actually put more bros up in the fucking, put them up there, right? But the reason why they try to destroy the bros with the prison and all that, they realize whoever those Mazungus are, the few and far between, right? Doing the Wizard of Oz, pulling the strings behind the curtains, right? Follow the yellow brick road. And all this shit too was happening during her time, quote unquote. I digress. We wouldn't be doing that. Historically, as you see, the divide and the conquer, the conquest, all of that stuff. We don't have the power. And if we ever did have that power and the weaponry and everything, if everything was reversed, because especially since we know way back biblically, we were disobedient, and this is the shit we're getting kicked for now. And now the Mzungus are just as equally, if not worse, to who we were biblically back then. Maybe it does that once again. The yin yang, it's gonna probably be reversed. And no, we're not. I wouldn't want to hurt anybody unless they're really hateful. Not to say it's always gonna be perfect, but heck, don't you think, my cool, precious fans out here in Getter, that don't you believe that? Hey, we because we've suffered so much, and I'm also throwing in white people, right? The white folks that know the truth, right? And you probably would even be good with it saying, no, not like Obama, all right? And this is what I'm saying. It's not black looking. I'm saying somebody who can really feel, because anytime we did have a chance, you took it away. And you infiltrated it and make it worse. Just like the Panthers, just like all the other aforementioned speakers I had said before, right? Whether it be King or Malcolm X. I mean, if those bros had survived into the 70s, 80s, 90s, it would have been a fucking different world. We know that, because anything they were saying was logical, to the sense that it's to make the world a better place, right? Her, he, her, whatever, comes up and says, hey, you know what? I'm going to be a hero. I don't want to bring people together. I want to make the world a better place by culling people, right? So it's a shame. It's sad, but this is why I'm saying start reevaluating, because we're there. And hey, and we hope that, once again, as it says in the books, this should be the time until the second coming for real, however that might manifest itself. I said earlier, the second coming might not just be one individual, super duper it could be a body. We never thought of it like that, right? It could be a body of people that could be that second coming. How about that to chew on? Think on. I kind of like that. It's true, eh? It makes a little sense, because we personify it, and we know the biblical scriptures are always like, we're learning now that it's all about the bodies, right? The kingdom. So maybe that Christ head, while we say it's got to be one physical, let's say 6'2" person or 5'8" dude, maybe he's black, maybe he's light skinned, I don't know, right? And you touch him and you fucking come back to life, and he fades out, fades in, translucent. What? Crazy fucking Mazulu niggas would milk that shit. They'd be like, what? He's here? Nuke it. Yeah. And what, you can't blow him up like in the movies, right? He reappears in the smoke, just walking down the street, tall, just a little taller than you. Some people taller than him, and he's like, all the Almighty. I don't know. We might need to reevaluate that, because I'm starting to think it's probably more than that. Maybe it's a body of people. It can be Jews and Israelites together, former Catholics. I say former, right? Get together under that Godhead and be that body and say, you know what? We're tired of shit, Satan. We're going to fucking run. Because it is about, even in war, the only reason why weapons exist and were made is to cull. So that would have to be part of that supernatural, right? Somehow, if that shit don't work, and then you can go in and infiltrate and kick ass and break it up. And it's been like that. That's how some wars have been won like that, right? The bomb, that bomb that was dropped, those bombs in World War II, that was a cheat, right? But anybody had that, especially then, and after, everyone had a bomb. So it's a moot situation. This is what we're seeing today. Playing chicken for no reason.
And that she, in fact, believed access to birth control would benefit, not eliminate minority populations. Dr. Katz turned down our request for an interview, although in this article, the editor as public authority, interpreting Margaret Sanger, she wrote, by our current highly sensitized standards, some of her attitudes and statements can be construed as racist, elitist, ethnocentric, and not politically correct.
No, be quiet. It is. All right? You can be perceived. If she was black and doing that shit, they would say, oh, that fucking nigger, she's so racist, she's so anti-Semitic, she's so this, she's so that. They would do that, right? But because, look, by our current highly sensitized standards, some of her, you know what? We got to blow that shit right the fuck up. We should not have any room for even that. And that's the problem we have in this society. We've softened so much that we're like, well, if it's a pedophile, you know what? Let's give the pedophile the benefit of the doubt, right? Meanwhile, when we know, even though it's been since the beginning of time, children have been sacrificed like fucking chicken that we eat, right? And there's a code to that. Or pizza, right? It's always the fucking kids. And I have to say it like that because I'm cool with kids, but fuck, so many people, it's like they've been so scarred. What is it what's the thrill of taking advantage of someone younger. Well, anyways, it's a deep, deep, deep thing. But it's been, like, you're talking Moloch shit, right? When they would literally put the babies up for fire, right, and sacrifice them all over the damn place. They're still doing it in different parts of the world. It never stopped. So where do we say enough is enough because of our laxados, over intellectual, well read ways of cheating life, right? And our own narcissistic, psychopathic, and when I say ours, I'm talking our people who represent the people that we, us fucking maniacs, voted, right? Let's just move on. Once again, thank you very much for joining the date. And yeah, Shlemiel Shlamazel, Happenstance Incorporated. Poor kids, from the mouths of babes. But hey, something's going to change. And of course, it's just a matter of time. You can't kill everyone. So check out this documentary. And as we're talking about the kids, so Project Sunshine was a series of research studies that began in 1953 to ascertain the impact of radioactive fallout on the world's population. What the fuck? Why? Right? But anyway, I digress. The project was initially kept secret because everything they do is in secret, thinking that when they die, they're not going to be able to, like, God's not going to pop up. Hey, Negro, remember? Like, let's replay this moment right here. Rewind. Freeze frame. See that shit? Yeah, you kept that in secret, eh? You were doing that in secret. Look at the repercussions of what that secret brought. Boom! And then you start feeling the same shit that everybody went through. Anyway, I'm just going deep there. And only became known publicly in 1956. So for 3 years, that shit went on. Right? Rock and roll was invented. The world went on. Commissioned jointly by the United States Atomic Energy Commission. Look at that. The atom, all that shit, right? Who's running it today? Or who's the energy guy? The guy with the lipstick and beard? Anyway, Sunshine sought to examine the long-term effects of nuclear radiation on the biosphere. Ironically, yeah, eventually the biosphere had a big ozone tear, right? Due to repeated nuclear detonations of increasing yield, with the conclusion from Project Gabrielle, Project Sunshine, Project Gabrielle, like the angel, right? That radioactive isotope SR90 represented the most serious threat to human health from nuclear fallout. Project Sunshine sought to measure the global dispersion of SR90 by measuring its concentration in tissues and bones of the dead. So let's just say those dead, they don't feel anything, right? Once again, maybe by the time those secret people doing their shit in secret, whatever they're doing to the bones, maybe they got to feel their marrow being sucked out and it's like painful. I'm just saying. Because it's easy for us to talk in the flesh and say, oh, we can take out marrow, we can break up bone, we can look at this person and treat this body this way. You see where I'm coming from? It's sinister shit. But hey, that's in the beginning, so in the end, right? Do what thou wilt. So wait, let me just take a quick look here. Project Gabriel was an investigation to gouge the impact of nuclear fallout resulting from nuclear. So they want to see how much fucking damage. So they had this backup project for that, right? With the conclusion from this Project Gabriel, right, which was SR90, strontium 90, radioactive isotope, strontium 90, SR90 presented the greatest hazard to life globally, which resulted in the commissioning of what? Of what? Huh? The commissioning of Project Sunshine. We're going to get back to that, which sought to examine levels of SR90 in human tissues and bones, with a special interest in infants gathered from around the world. So if they're doing that, gathering around the world, right? Once again, you could look up this whole project Gabriel as it was, right? Prove that they would harm humans. This shit's going on. They're testing it out, and it's they're doing this is based on the project that shows, once again, to show how much damage can be done, the worst of the worst. So they create this shit, they fuck with all these chemicals, all these atoms, and say, oh, how bad can it be? It's like children, right? Like little boys or even some girls. When we were kids, we like to, we learned fire, right? We had the matches back then. It was matches mostly, and yeah, you could make a mistake by accidentally burning down the house, right? If you stuck your finger in the socket, right, or any scenario, it didn't mean that every kid that might have had that little mishap, like most of us, not of us, not all of us were burning down houses, but I mean, kids will be kids. We start playing with matches. We like, let's burn some shit, right? Well, it's like that, except that might create, somebody who could be a pyro, right? Somebody running around, fucking setting up fires everywhere. Pyromaniacs. Now, that doesn't mean every kid that played with fire would do that. Some kids would take that, use that, and maybe use that whole experience to become a chemist. Doesn't mean chemists are bad, but maybe, they could actually, with good intention, become a good chemist and make good things happen. You might have a third friend who might be also a scientific professor or doctor of the sort, and they might want to do something that helps but is detrimental. No scruples, because hey, I don't believe in life after death, so let's try and be God and make that happen. So you got these folks who would grow up on that, and here you go, as psychopathic as they are, they say they get money and through the grapevine, and they get these projects and they do worse, right? They do shit like this. They say, well, from fire to radioactive isotope SR90, is that the most serious threat next to fire, next to burning the fuck out of something and someone, right? From nuclear fallout. Project Sunshine sought to measure the global dispersion of SR90 by, yes, so tissues of the dead. So you call it Project Sunshine, and I guess that probably the sun is, the big sun is radioactive as it is, right? It's full of energy, full of everything. The sun is life, right? Elected a great deal of controversy when it was revealed that many of the remains sampled were utilized without prior permission from, of course, as always, who is Henrietta Lacks, right? When they took her DNA blood samples and cured half the freaking world with whatever. See, good, bad. They're always about that. So why they needed to die, But they did it. Why? What was the long term? To possibly use the same shit today, well over fucking 7 years later, right? And even then, one thing I'm realizing, even back then when they made all this shit, what I'm realizing is happening now with all their weapons of mass destruction. That shit has what do you say, a storage life. There's a certain date. Like a lot of this shit they say even now, what we're doing with Ukraine, a lot of this shit they're saying is old, it's outdated, it doesn't work. So it's always, it's always a cycle. It's almost like you're always giving yourself a backhand every time. You're going forward, you get backhanded back. Anyway, let's move on. So, and I don't want to get too much into it because once again, this is for you to research, even though it's a little mundane. So human samples are often the prime of importance. If anybody knows how to do a good job of body snatching, they will really be serving their country. Wow. So this is this guy, Willard Libby, Dr. Willard Libby, right? In 1955, January 8th, then AEC commissioner, said there was insufficient data regarding the effects of fallout due to the lack of human samples. Meanwhile, especially samples taken from children to analyze. Right? Quoted as saying, I don't know how to get them, but I do say it's a matter of prime importance to get them, and particularly in the young age group. Right? And then he goes on with the body snatching. Like, fuck, this guy said that. Right? But back then, folks were not as educated to, take in that. right? That's the facts. So this led to over, and then once again, have discernment. They say this number, maybe you want to add another or double that, triple, 1,500 samples being gathered, of which only, because you got 1,500, you didn't need the other 1,000, you just put it in the freezer, eat it, chuck it, whatever, right? Abuse it. 500 were analyzed. Hmm. Many of the 1,500 sample cadavers were babies and young children, of course, and were taken from countries from, of course, Australia to Europe. You might as well throw in Africa, even though you don't say, often without the parents' consent. So that's the body snatching. And it's still going on today, right? Today we call it trafficking. According to the investigation launched after a British newspaper reported that British scientists had obtained children's bodies from various hospitals and shipped their body parts to the US. Yeah, her stillborn baby legs were moving. Yeah, we don't even need to go there because they did it. They did it. Right? In 58, right? I'm thinking Elvis going into the military here and all that shit. Sunshine was brought to Belgium. What better place to go? Scientists started doing tests that were slightly different than those done previously by analyzing soils in the agricultural regions instead of human bones. So yeah, if you get in the soil and you feed the people, it'll get in the bones, right? That's why we have our good old food. Yeah, and now the farmers are kicking ass. Go farmers. So I don't want to get too much into it. You have to read it. I'm just opening up your eyes to it. But it goes on to say they headed in two main directions: environmental surveys and experimental research in natural and in controlled conditions. That's pretty much what our climate thing is all about, right? That's just the origin of it. Their goal was to see the effect of this shit in the soil and see how it transferred to the grass grazing animals such as cow and sheep. Isn't it interesting? We just lost like something like 10,000 cows and sheep recently, and then the people in the Dutch went and fucked up Bill's whatever his lab or whatever the company where they're doing all this stuff, right? The news will not tell you about it. They're not covering this shit, but you don't need to. All you have to do is look up your history, repeating itself. So the animals from which humans consume milk and meat. I won't go further, right? But this guy now, Dr. Whitlock, Director of Health Education and National Dairy Council, discussed the impact of that thing, that shit 90 in the cow milk consumed by humans. So you hear what I'm saying here? Are you reading this with me? This is how I said, you can speed read and you can cherry pick because you're not a fucking idiot. I'm here to confirm you're not. You're not stupid. You don't know how to read? I'm encouraging you. This is quick reading, like quick typing. Key fucking words. You don't let anybody tell you different. Right? They're telling you. They said. This guy, Dr. Whitlock, 1957. Look up his ass, where he comes from, right? Discuss the impact of ST90 nuclear shit that'll cancer your ass up. Maybe has since 1957 in cow milk consumed by humans, concluding that the effects of SIR-90 would not be detectably harmful to the general populace of the. How the fuck did that nigger know that? He long dead now. I'm sure he's finding out. Living the realm and repeat of anybody from his word and his secret, right? That's how deep it can be. We never think of it. He's dead, right? And now he's wherever he is, and maybe, I'm just hypothesizing, throwing it out there, reliving every person who drank that milk. From the cow that got sick, that died, and yeah, the milk's being produced, the liquid's going through, yeah, living that shit, and then going down someone's belly, and next thing you know, you're going through the time because there's no time, right? You hit that timeline, bam, that person got a bellyache, bam, that person, and imagine going through millions, billions, indirectly affected by that one person. That's why we say, and I base it off, someone say that's far-fetched. No, well, base it on, we never examine that. We say people do shit without any consequence. But when you hear about the life-death experience and all this stuff of the few and far between, because you got to have discernment, by who's telling you, right? Whether it be agent or not, confusion or not, we hear about this stuff that they feel, especially ones who get close to hell. They said they feel shit. People like to say, oh, well, we don't feel pain in hell, right? But you are the breath, and the breath can be sucked out of you. God has that power. We don't know what God could do. That's why people say, oh, we don't feel anything. You know that for a fact that God could say, you know what? You're living forever. If you're living and being in his image, what? You don't think you could feel that? But that's how deep it can go. That's why we always have to watch out. We talk about karma. Only because we have this kind of limited time in this vessel doesn't mean that that karma will not play out after, right? And then you can go down with reincarnation, whatnot, right? Maybe that's a grace, being reincarnated, compared to what the soul can get in Sheol, being thirsty, not being able to quench that thirst, right? Gnashing teeth and all that. Anyway, so all of that to say, you see, Cernite in the cow milk consumed by humans. Simple as it is. Simple. Yeah, there's shit. There's nuclear shit, radioactivity in the milk. What? Let's continue. Blah, blah, blah. Convoluted. Well, blah, blah, blah. Convoluted. See, they slide that in. You might as well throw in, 90% in the cow milk consumed by niggers, concluding that the effects of SR90 would not be detectably harmful to the general populace of the niggers in the US, right? From foregoing information, yeah, blah, blah, blah. So those fucking Negroes here did that. And thus, if you want to read the PDF, you got that. You can download that shit and see for yourself. But why I brought this up was, once again, Project Sunshine. It's the kids who suffered right through and still today. This is all relevant to what we're living right now. So, world wakes up to horrific scientific history. June, okay, this was nearly 20 years ago, 21 years ago, 2001. Can you believe that? It's been that long. This summer, by September, we're looking at 21 years since 9/11? It's been over 20 years. How much shit has happened since then? Half of you weren't even alive. So, let's look at this. Half a century after studies on the effects of radioactive fallout were carried out in the United States, half a century after, right? US and Britain, the world is waking up to the body snatching of the 50s. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. They even have the film. Called Project Sunshine. Okay, so we basically previously researched where this shit comes from, right? But in 20 years ago, after the 80s, after they were re-acknowledged it in the 80s, 20 years later, they came back. Maybe the ghost came back to somehow haunt a few, and they had to make reparations on it, right? So they launched an investigation again into reports of Australian baby samples being dispatched for Project Sunshine without parents' permission. Don't forget, hey, all throughout those years, Americans were actually throwing what they call alligator babies, throwing black babies in the fucking ponds, right? Don't think they weren't doing that shit out there in Australia. Don't think they weren't doing it all of these other places like South Africa, right? We need to verify if Australian babies were used in this manner, how many, and from where they came, said, well, yeah. So you need to investigate where? They're fucking from there. What do you need to investigate where they came from? They're Australian fucking babies, right? Duh. Okay, obtain children's bodies from Vary and ship their bones, and all this for nuclear what? For classified nuclear experiments. Wicked fucking people, right? Because their goal in mind is at their old age already. Then, well, if somebody wants to hurt us, we gotta make sure you just can't kill them. You gotta fucking, uh, you know, nuclear. You gotta nuke them out. You gotta get them, and you gotta be so insidious that you gotta put it in their milk, so when they drink it unknowingly and they eat the food, right? Because we saw what it did to the babies, the innocent, dumb as fuck babies, right? Who had no life here, anyways. You're just meat. You're just cattle. Look, it didn't kill them that quick. It killed them slowly. So it's not that bad. In fact, hey, we can make money with it. You know, classified nuclear experiments, right? So because we want to crush the enemy, a grown-ass man like that. Oceans away in Hong Kong, a British colony until what, 1997? True that. The newspaper set off a furor. prompting authorities to launch, and then Korea on Wednesday. Yeah, Hong Kong, Taiwan, all that. Yeah, made in Taiwan. Remember, serving their country more than, once again, that number, 1,500 cadavers, many of them babies, were gathered from half a dozen. So yeah, in the 50s. So in 1995, a Presidential Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments, set up by former Billy Clinton, released classified documents from the Atomic Energy Commission, which showed that scientists working on Project Sunshine were aware, of course, and of the dubious ethical and legal grounds on which the research was being conducted. So that's today, right? If anything, in a case of crimes against humanity, this is how we have to take the approach. But that's all the history going back from World War II, right? Willard Libby, this guy, remember that, bro? A University of Chicago researcher who went on to win the 1960 Nobel Prize in Chemistry, acknowledged that the difficulty in getting human samples was resulting in great gaps in the, oh, fuck you, right? Importance to get them, and particularly in the young age group, so human samples are of prime importance. Bits and pieces. Unsuspecting parents, like that's even a moot point, right? This story we already saw, the stillborn baby. I mean, it's nothing new, I hate to say, but even the fact that one story can come out every 20 years is the same, same shit, right? It almost has no bite to it. I asked if I could put her christening robe on her, but I wasn't allowed to. That upset me because she wasn't. Yeah, well. Though British and Canadian media have in the past reported that cadavers of infants were sent to the US for Project Sunshine, there have been no official investigations into the murky shipments. 50 years later, while admitting British scientists did indeed work on Project Sunshine, Elizabeth Taylor, spokeswoman for the UK Atomic Energy Authority, said the organization was only beginning to sift through hundreds of documents and yada, yada, yada. So they're not going to do shit. This is going to be one of those things that God's going to have to reveal. But it's going to be revealed through the shit that's happening now. That's what I say. And when you link those pieces up, we're probably going to see a Nuremberg 2, but this time it's going to be so deep and so entrenched that, yeah, it's not going to go down that easy. It won't be so, you know, nice like how it was, like we see in the old videos where the guy's chilling, sitting down, getting advice from the lawyer, the same fucking nigger lawyer that'll end up in the United States, right? Nah, it's very, very intricate and very much a meticulous type of operation we have to deal with here. So yeah, so this is what I'm showing you here. So serving their country, yeah, right? The babies did. So this goes on to, as we're near wrapping up, thank you again, once again, give a like, subscribe, share, take what you can from the nuggets of what you could in this episode. We're gonna just quickly wrap up, and I'll just show you a few extra books here. Ugaru's Eunuchs by Mawilimo Baruti. This is a very interesting book because it's the study of European culture and the effeminized African males, because this is something that's actually, for a lot of folks, this is coming up, right? A lot of folks, they're talking about the eunuch and how the eunuch, somehow they're trying to throw that into the LGBT and I, which is the intersex. My argument is maybe these folks don't want to fucking join that. Maybe they just don't, they want to be left alone. So I would say part of that is understanding the study of the eunuch. Because the eunuch, if anything, why would we want to label them as what sex they should prefer? When in fact that sterilization might determine neither. It might not determine more if they're gay or straight, right? They've been castrated, so why throw that? Why have to throw that when it's actually more at this point not as physical, but they're throwing that in because, hey, somehow we gotta make eunuchs look like they want sex, and yeah, maybe they do, but at the same time, right? Who are you to fucking dictate what your discrepancy is? Anyway, the confusion within our community is not without cause. People without a commanding dynamic ancestral vision, without an identity beyond the limits imposed by a Eurocentric reality, without our storial understanding, without hope, often succumb to impotent images of power in order to feel they are participating in a revolutionary movement or struggle. Okay, or struggle to save themselves from the unrelenting horror assailing them. When chaos abounds, those caught up in it, but who are not its source, are often forced to settle for whatever limitations in reality's possibilities the creators and benefactors of that chaos allow. Warriorhood has a universal definition bound out by the our storial and historical, yeah, our historical and historical record. Compromise. Our historical. That's interesting. I like that. It's an interesting word. I'll have to check that. I've never heard that like that. Compromise and submission to the powerlessness, to include the conscious misdefinition of self, are not part of any feasible definition of warriorhood. Adapting the definition of those who are against them leaves a people without the cultural moorings of which keep whatever is not them and anything which makes their soldiers dysfunctional in battle against their enemies from harming them. So I guess, yeah, because warriors, a lot of the warriors were eunuchs too, right? They were the ones who guarded, for the kings and the wives and whatnot. So what could be, more, um, how we say, a target in a battle between men is your nuts, right? Kick a guy in the nuts, it's done, right? So from what I understand, and like it's even further, it's more than that, but the idea I surmise is you knock out a man's nuts, they can still be built. They probably have, the once again, that's a whole the hormone, the testosterone, and maybe I don't know the study of it, but it's known that they were good warriors. The eunuchs were kicking ass. Yeah, I guess you don't have balls. You don't got balls to kick. You got no balls to grab or cut. You're gonna probably kick better ass than the guy who has, right? Um, so warriors defend their people's rights to be their traditional selves, regardless of time frame, regardless of the other's antagonistic presence, regardless of internal discord. We cannot expect our warrior class to have an African definition of man or womanhood or warriorhood if being African means nothing more than being a well-heeled European shadow. We cannot ignore the regressive downward trajectory of African manhood or womanhood in this godforsaken anti-African cultural context where Urugu rules regardless of our delusions of validated grandeur. So that's the description. And my takeaway is, yeah, there's probably so much more to it that don't think that shit doesn't exist anymore today, right? Who knows? Maybe our world leaders are eunuchs, and once again, uh, right, what comes with that? But this is, I'd say, an interesting book to overlook. Not overlook, but read and overlook maybe everything else that you've heard about the eunuch. Because they are some of our entertainers, our singers, right? Castrados. So while that is what it is, I highly recommend, yeah, do a little research. So I saw that, and it's all part of the non-traditional sexual practices of African people, right? Because this is not new news, but hey, we weren't talking about LGBT today. Maybe once again, we are always the first ones to know and get a heads up on that stuff. Whether through being through the buck breaking farms, right? Swing around, and all thanks to good old folks like the following gentleman, Oliver Cromwell. Oh boy, this guy is a doozy, right? Because once again, if you look at the folks of the time and what those folks did, how wicked it can be. Here we are today, we're like reliving everything that they're doing. And they just, basically groomed other folks to do the same darn thing. So with that being said, hey, who are we now in how we're living, right? Who are we now to actually say, well, we can judge, we can call a shot. If somebody's got to be, how we say, castrated, it's for the better. But this is once again that one of those things that in the ritual of life, rituals from the beginning. Menticide, right? That's part of what menticide is also. We're going to look into that word also, right? Because you call it genocide, you can call it eugenics, menticide. It's all murder. So we'll look into the orphan trains real quick, and this is actually the biggest piece of this current episode here, because this will at least hope, I hope, and presenting this now will open your mind as to why things are so fucked up now, because you had a generation of orphans, and God knows what they've been through, whether it be boxed up, caged up, whipped, dipped, chipped, right? Let's see. And of course, Oliver Cromwell, what he did way back. Let's take a look, right? So, 25th April, 1599, 3rd September, 1658, was an English general and statesman who first as subordinate and later as commander-in-chief led armies of Parliament England against King Charles I during the English Civil War, was subsequently ruling British Isle as Lord Protector until his death. So this guy, born into landed gentry, British social class of landowners who could live entirely from rental income, at least had a country estate, right? So yeah, colonials. Descended from the sister of Henry VIII. Okay. Minister Thomas Cromwell, briefly Earl of Essex, English lawyer, when he was beheaded in others. So from the sister of Henry VIII's minister, Thomas Cromwell, his great-great-granduncle, little is known of the first 40 years of his life. See, just like almost a Christ thing. We never know what's going on in between, as only of four of his personal letters survive. So we don't even know shit about this guy anymore. Give me a break. Along with the summary of his speech. So he became an independent Puritan. Puritans were the English Protestants, 1617s, maintaining the church. But what we did learn with all of this history, right, that during the English Civil War, the Marston Moors of 1644, let's see, the Battle of Marston Moor. I'm trying to find here, because with all these battles that this guy did, we do understand that he was quite the warrior, and even then, in all that time, we understand that Cromwell was very big on not only that, but his effect in Ireland when it comes to even what was happening with the Black Irish and the indentured slaves, right? Who were also white and also mixed. So this guy's so brutal throughout his whole career of war. We see where he comes from. Let's just read this here. The debate over Cromwell's effect on Ireland. The extent of Cromwell's brutality in Ireland has been strongly debated. Some historians argue that Cromwell never accepted responsibility for the killing of civilians in Ireland, claiming that he had acted harshly but against those in arms. Okay. Other historians cite Cromwell's contemporary reports to London, including that of September 27th, 1649, in which he lists the slaying of 3,000 military personnel, followed by the phrase, and many inhabitants. In September 1649, he justified the sacking of Drogheda as revenge for the massacres of Protestant settlers in Ulster, 1641, calling the massacre the righteous judgment of God on these barbarous wretches who have imbrued their hands with so much innocent blood, right? But rebels had not held Drogheda in 1641. Many of its garrison were in fact English royalists. On the other hand, the worst atrocities committed in Ireland, such as mass evictions, killings, and deportation of over 50,000 men, once again, those numbers, that's what they say, men, women, and children as prisoners of war and indentured servants to Bermuda and Barbados, were carried out under the command of other generals after Cromwell had left England. So I just went there just to show you that, hey, Bermuda, Barbados, even Jamaica, right? When they had the buck farms, all of this is where comes from these folks. They set shit up and they make it happen. But they just say Bermuda and Barbados, like, hey, look over that. But even in Ireland, we do now know through reading the books that those folks, these so-called women, and there a lot of them were black Irish, right? And thus prisoner, and then send them with the mixing to these places, Bermuda, Barbados. Some point to his actions on entering Ireland. Cromwell demanded that no supplies be seized from civilian inhabitants and that everything be fairly purchased. I do hereby warn all officers, soldiers, others under my command, do not to do anything wrong or violent towards country, people, or any persons whatsoever unless they be actually in arms. Yada yada. Right? The 30 Years' War. One of the most destructive wars in European history. An estimated 4.58 million soldiers and civilians died as a direct result, while some areas in Germany experienced population declines of over 50%. So, going back, what they don't tell you, who are all of those people? They're not all white people. Those people were, yeah, whether it be Israelites coming, if you go with the genealogy and the history, right? Thus, even in Russia, the Black Russians, right? So this is unanimous with everything else going on everywhere, right? So in this Wikipedia page, it shows us that this guy, in his own way, the reputation of him, he was a tyrant. But we don't see, especially in a lot of the books, as there are other documentaries that I'll show you, even I'll give you the link later, on the Black Irish, right? There's so many, and the books are out there, which gives you more detail as to all of this, but you won't even see it here on this page, right? Once again, they'll probably get maybe a general look over on the person, right? But when you come and you take a look, as I recommend and implore you, take a look at this documentary on the Black Irish diaspora, right? The undeniable proof they are ancestors of many Caribbean U.S. peoples, right?
Geneticists are concluding the same thing. And right here we have Riddles of Prehistoric Times by James H. Anderson. Says here the first inhabitants of southern Europe, northern Africa, Arabia, France, and the British Islands were a race of small men.
So I'm going to just breeze through it because this is a brilliant channel. I like the way this brother speaks, right? Let's see here. I'll even open it up, give credit where credit is due. And that would be coming from Kirimu Ahu, right? Kirimu Ahu. He's got an amazing site. I checked it out. This kid is like, well, I say kid, young man. I'm talking in my old Gen Xer way. Probably is a Gen Xer also. But this bro brings it up. If folks want to, ask and say, hey, what's this all about?
Either
Check what this brother said.
English. All right, a lot of them were labeled English. According to law, the voyage didn't begin until the ship cleared from English port. Hence, all the passengers on arrival in the American colonies were rated as stock auction. Again, same stories they told us they were doing to these so-called Africans. They were doing this to sugar planters in Barbados, in Jamaica, and throughout the West Indies.
the women and children who were left homeless and dead.
So I'm just going to rewind it a little bit just because I want to get to the point, just so you get an idea. So we saw that Oliver Cromwell in Wikipedia. Let's learn what Mr. Kiramu here, a bro that's teaching us unknown history that we never talk about, even though people will say, oh, it's horrible and it's the past. Okay, let's see how much of the past is relevant today.
Deck. When the slaves were brought on deck, 40 to 50 of them were chained together to keep them from trying to stage a mutiny or commit suicide by jumping overboard. These are the same stories they told us about so-called African slaves. Hygiene was non-existent, and slaves experienced dehydration, dysentery, and scurvy, which led to high mortality rates. Many were thrown overboard to avoid infecting others. This was not good. The slave owners saw this as a loss of profit. Again, you see, this is a real middle passage. This is really happening. This is recorded. But they told you it was happening in a different way. And they told you it was coming out of Africa. And that was false. The passage across the Atlantic typically would take 9 to 12 weeks, depending on the weather. Food was always an issue aboard ship. There sometimes wasn't enough food to feed both the slaves and the crew. If a slave died due to starvation during the passage, the insurance company would pay for the loss. All right, they were insured. Listen to this. This is a real venture, a business venture. They had charters business, right? Companies, right? The Somers Island companies, the Virginia company, Massachusetts, the Plymouth company. So they had insurance backing any losses up. So when there was a food shortage, the solution was to throw slaves overboard. The ship's captain would claim they died of sickness or were lost at sea. One ship was cited for dumping 1,302 Irish slaves into the Atlantic Ocean on a single passage so that the crew would have plenty of food to eat.
All right. So you're getting it a complete different narrative to what was watered down even on Wikipedia, right? And what I find very interesting about this, as this narrator will tell you, is that a lot of the folks who were slaves, and I know this is a big thing now. They're saying, how true was this? And and he's telling you in this book that was written before. So those folks who can say they can debate whether it really did happen, how frequently, and all of this based on the fact that you can put all these people in the great design of things, they're telling you here that, hey, maybe it's so real that we know that how many thousands of people were tossed overboard, right? And what can also add to the proof? Well, you had all those companies, right? They were insurance. So that's how intricate it got. And this is what, 500 years ago? So you had companies like the sugar, right? The British Dutch West Indies. In our case, because people think of everything in North America, like we're talking Canada, we had the Bay, the Hudson Bay. And I'll be doing something on that when I cover Montreal in another post, as we look a little deeper into the origins of even New France and what eventually, starting from New France, became today North America, right? Including America. So, but in the meantime, right, this is important history to know. And everywhere you did have a bro involved. So they whitewashed a lot of it and they say, that's what you have. You can have the indentured servants. And of course, that, the understanding that whites too experienced that just as bad, even in some cases. But when you look at what our narrator was saying, the insurance, those people, right? Like the companies that have been around since what, the 15th, 16th century? Holy freak, that's a long time. So you think they don't have power anymore? Of course they do. That's why America is corporate. So this is, I'm just mentioning that to at least show you how far down the rabbit hole and the history, which is maybe not even that long. Those guys out there that you see in this painting, this might have been, okay, 500 years. You're looking at least maybe what, 20 grandfathers away. Great, 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 great. 20, 30, give that, right?
This is recorded. and the ships, names, and everything. We've read this information before a lot. Check out my indentured servitude, white servitude videos. Under the worst of conditions such as sickness, suicide, and even murder at the hands of the slave crew and captains, ships would lose most of their human cargo. On average, the Irish slave ships lost 20 to 30% on the passage to the New World. And in the bottom paragraph here regarding Oliver Cromwell and the Irish Protestants and Catholic Irish in their war, the Irish Rebellion of 1641, and then Oliver Cromwell's retaliation. He was Protestant. So it says here Cromwell harbored a hostile attitude toward the Irish for both religious and political reasons. He was passionately opposed to the Catholic Church because of the power of the papal and clerical authority over the people. As for political reasons, the Irish killing of Protestants during the Irish Rebellion of 1641 was foremost on his mind. Cromwell started his war with Ireland in August 1649 with an attack against Drogheda, a prosperous town just north of Dublin. Remember, Dublin means black. Cromwell's army overtook the town, slaughtering soldiers, men, women, and children. Catholic priests were considered combatants and were killed on sight.
So right off the bat, look up this book. I don't have the title, but I know there's a link. Kirumu will put links. So what we read earlier just now with the wiki, you didn't hear anything from this angle, right? Like he said, most of the folks during those years, whether it be with the future Germany as we know and Russia, they were black. Not a big deal because even then, back then, black then, it wasn't, race wasn't as much the issue as much as there were more politics and more deeper stuff going on, right? That's why you can have, like, hey, for all we know, Cromwell might have some Negro in him as well, right? And he could have been, so I guess if you can see where I'm coming from. But he carried himself as a supremacist and colonialist, right? Because that's like the Moors. You had some Moors who were doing that shit to us also.
Cromwell, in his first letter back to the Council of State, said of Drogheda, I believe we put the sword the whole number of the defendants. I do not think 30 of the whole number escaped with their lives. Over 3,500 people died in the massacre. Those who survived were transported and sold as slaves to the West Indies and the American colonies.
So that would be Jamaica, Grenada, ooh, mama, Barbados, that song by the Beach Boys, but all of the islands, pretty much. And then from there, take them there, break them, rape them, pillage, get the incest thing, get the all kinds of things happening, and then you go. The DNA is, ruined, right? Because of the whole breakup of community, bloodlines, and the rest. So before we talk about the West Indies and get there and go there, we have to realize that the West Indies had been long, myself having the Trinidadian Arawak roots, right? That whole sugar plantation in the 1492, that's a long time, right? Like the Bay, the Hudson Bay, right? 16 something something. I'll come up to that. So I just wanted to breeze through this.
Slaves, all right? Slaves to the West Indies. Cromwell wrote after the campaign, I am persuaded that this is a righteous judgment of God upon these barbarous wretches who have imbrued their hands in so much innocent blood, and that will tend to prevent the effusion of blood for the future, which are satisfactory grounds for such actions which otherwise cannot but work remorse and regret.
Okay, so you can look that up, you can read up on it because, it goes on more. Actually, I'll just give you a little tip more.
And to Barbados, to work in the sugarcane fields, or to Virginia. Continuing a little further in the book with Cromwell's mission to get rid of the Irish Catholics, right? It says, during the 12 years of Irish rebellion, we're at the bottom here, the Irish population fell from 1,466,000 to 616,000. Over 550 Irishmen were killed, and 300,000 were sold as slaves to the sugar planters. in Barbados, in Jamaica, and throughout the West Indies. The women and children who were left homeless and destitute also had to be dealt with. The British solution was to round them up and sell them as slaves. Over 100,000 Irish Catholic children were taken from their parents and sold as slaves, many to Virginia and New England.
Okay, so I'm gonna let that there, and you can actually read up more, right? Because this brother has a good cast. Once again, he'll do it like maybe 3, 4 hours, depending on. And I like this type of broadcast, and we need more of it, right? Because this is better than, like when you go to a university, you're bussing how many hours, hundreds of hours to get credits, right? And to listen to a lecture by someone who will just be ranting too, and you take and pick and choose and all of that. So this is what my show's about. Once again, thank you very much for checking out the date. We'll be